G'day everyone, I'm Smokescreen and welcome back to another video. And here we go, with some more daily race C action. However, from the previous week, from last week, is this particular race from, still at Spa, in the wet weather. We've done a few videos on this, including a track walk, so do check that out if you get a chance. But as for this video today, this race was really cool. I was fighting up the front here, and I started in second position with a qualifying time of 44.4, 2 minute 44.4, and we pull off the line with traction control. The leader gets away a lot better driving the Audi R8, coming into the Source hairpin there. I think I've got Liang Lu on the inside. Just shuffles me out of the way. I think I turned across his front a little bit, so not too much to worry about there. He's just going to slot in ahead, and that is all good for now. We've broken the gap behind a little bit, or not broken, it's probably not the right word, not broken, slip definitely, but we've opened up the gap behind a little bit so we can sort of focus more attention on the car ahead rather than worrying about the cars behind as we head up Eau Rouge and Radeon for the first time. That gap behind has opened up to beyond the slipstream range, 1.5 seconds about. But as for the guy in front, he's going to go defensive coming into Le Com chicane right at the start of the race. It's perhaps not the best decision to start defending, but he can do what he likes. Coming through Le Com chicane, he gets a low to oversteer there, and he's narrow for the upcoming right-hander at turn 7, I think is that corner, and I get a load of oversteer as I'm trying to get the overlap to send it down the inside at the next hairpin at the bottom of the hill here. In fact, actually the hairpin still going down the hill, but yeah, we're not quite able to get that done. Just the car stepping out a little bit of oversteer on the way through, and I'm not able to get that one done. Okay, so the wet weather, yes, it's absolutely pouring rain. It's very interesting when these combinations come up as we're looking down the inside at Pouon. Not the best spot, but that was basically just to try and sort of force him into a mistake. He's actually got a very good Pouon there, and he's opened up that gap to about half a second. But that's not job done, that's just bookmark for now. Let's just focus on trying to lap cleanly and consistently in order to remain close enough to be able to get a move on this guy at some point. I qualified ahead of him, so theoretically I should be quicker than him, but you know, theory doesn't always translate into practice. The leader's qualifying time is probably a pretty good example of that. He set a 2:43, about a second faster than me, and you know, he's driving off 2.7 seconds, but I'm also getting held up a little bit, and we'll see how that translates for the rest of the race. But I don't mind a bit of wet weather driving. It comes up just about frequently enough to be enjoyable. If they did it every second week, every third week, you know, that may get a little bit boring, especially because it's only on a select few tracks, the wet weather conditions. Spa being one of them, obviously, and then Tokyo Expressway, the east and the centre loops have wet weather on it as well, and Red Bull Ring also has wet weather, and I believe that's all of it, as we just send it clean down the inside of the bus stop chicane. We set that move up heading through Blanchimont, and we're able to get it down the inside there because that Honda, driven by Liang Lu, the guy broke very early, and it just left a lot on the table, and I managed to maximise the braking zone as best as possible, and it just gave me a whole load of extra speed down the inside, and we met the apex on the chicane. We haven't met the apex on the Source hairpin as the two guys behind do, but I get a faster, straighter exit, not the best entry, but a faster exit, and honestly, sometimes that's the best way to drive in the rain. So it's interesting. What's interesting to note is that in real life, your normal wet weather driving is very different to how you do it in Gran Turismo, Sport at least. So generally what happens in real life is you're racing, and as you're lapping in the dry, you put down like a nice rubber racing line. The tyre deposits rubber, and it sort of pushes it down into the road basically, and you get a racing line with rubber basically ground into the surface. And what that does in the dry, it offers a lot of grip. So when we talk about he's gone offline, you've actually got less grip in real life. This is all in real life, remember, because you're off that rubberized racing line. But then what happens in the wet is all the rubber that's in the surface, the water sits on top of the rubber, because what really is supposed to happen is the aggregate in the surface, you know, all the dimples and all the imperfections in the road, the water can sink down into it, meaning that you've essentially got less water in between the surface that the tyre sits on and your tyre, because that surface water can sort of flow through the channeling that's just naturally in the road surface. But because that's all filled with rubber on the racing line, the water sits on top of the rubber right on the surface basically. So when you're racing in the wet, you've got to thick layer of water, relatively thick, in between you and the road, which means you got less grip. So generally in the wet weather driving, this is again still in real life, you want to actually try and stay off the racing line, and especially stay off the curbs, because the paint on the curbs acts much the same way. But you want to race offline. You see here, I'm taking the racing line as normal and using curbs. The only difference is it's just a lot slower because I've got just overall less grip. But yeah, very different to real life. So what you can do for a hairpin in real life, for example, you can jump on the brakes nice and narrow into the hairpin, sort of go past the apex deep into the corner, so you're sort of on the outside of where that rubberized racing line is. Pivot the car nice and quickly, and then get a straight run out the exit again, taking a narrow exit to stay off that rubber. But yeah, in Gran Turismo it's not quite that realistic. There's no deposited rubber on a racing line here, so you really just take the racing line because it's got the same level of grip as every single other part of the track in these wet conditions. So while we've been talking there, I've set myself a 244.9, which is actually a decent race pace lap. Pretty quick indeed, especially given that my qualifying time is, I think, is 44.4, and I've gone and set a 44.9 with tyre wear and fuel load on board in the race. And remember, we discussed Neo Avante, who's currently taking up lead position in this particular race. His qualifying time was about a second quicker than mine, and in fact over the course of this last lap, as the car just gets a little bit unsettled, a little bit unstable over the rise of Radeon, he's definitely not gaining anymore. He was about 2.5 seconds by the time we got past Liang Lu, who's now fallen, I think that's over a second behind. He's at 1.8 seconds behind. Yeah, it is. It's just clicked to 1.9, and I can actually finally make out what number that actually is, because it was too small before. But anyway, yeah, the gap to Liang Lu's opened up, so he's just dropped off a little bit, and I'm starting to bridge this gap towards Neo Avante, and I'm managing to do that quite well, actually. So I definitely expected this guy to be lapping a lot quicker than I could, especially with that qualifying time to show. But yeah, that's definitely not happening at this stage. So what we've got to try and do now is just minimise the mistakes. They're really easy to make as well because of the lack of grip. You brake 1 metre too late, and you've got no grip to try and recover that extra little bit of braking distance that you've got to that you've sort of done away with because you broke too late. You're going to go deep into the corner and perhaps even send it off the track. And then, you know, once you trying to recover a late break, it's so easy to spin, just as we've demonstrated there, getting a little bit wide out of Poo on there, but that gap to the lead is still hovering at about 1.5 seconds, so he's definitely not gaining, and it's at this particular stage he might be looking at the gap thinking, I'm struggling to break away from this Smok guy. He might start to feel the pressure. Neo Avante might start to feel the pressure, is what I mean. And that just may put you into a mistake. So what you want to try and avoid is thinking about too much at once as you're driving, especially in the wet weather conditions where actually just keeping the car under control takes up a lot more of your mental capacity than it does in the dry, because you've got to think about your throttle and your brake and your steering a lot more than you do in the dry. We also just in general practice the wet weather a lot less than we do the dry. So when you jump on the wet track, you've got to do a lot of thinking, a lot of brain power to try and sort of just keep the car in one piece. And what that does is it takes away your ability to think about other things. So the strategy gets less attention, the tyre wear gets less attention, your fuel use gets less attention, your opponents get less attention. But if you can just put pressure on someone just by being right behind them, ready to capitalise on any potential mistake they may make, they can begin to start focusing on you a little bit more than what their brain can actually handle, and then all of a sudden they're focusing on you too much, and it's taking away some brain power, some brain mental capacity in controlling the car, which therefore means they can be closer and closer to a mistake. So that last lap there was a 45.1, so we're still in hot pursuit. Would you call it hot pursuit? It'd be cold pursuit, wouldn't it? It'd be fairly cool weather with all the cloud cover and the rain. But anyway, the gap to the guy, 1.4 seconds now, so we've gained a couple of tenths there. I think we've had a very good Eau Rouge Radeons. We're going to come up to Le Combe Chicane, a lot of time to be gained through here, but the first protocol is not braking too late. We've actually had a very good first sector there. We're 1/10 up on our previous fastest lap of a 44.9. That was the fastest lap of the race at the time, but since then, Yama Kuson, our good friend Yama Kuson, our notorious rival, has set a 43.7, so he's actually a very quick driver, and you know, it's a little bit disappointing some of the actions that Yama did in the Nürburgring Dirty Race video. I now don't quite hold him in such high regard as I used to, and that pace is just there from Yama Kusan just goes to show he probably deserves the respect. But you know, you've got to have the same respect back. You've got to treat everyone else with respect, and you'll have that respect given back to you. But what's actually interesting there is Yama Kusan is definitely showing his hand as having very quick pace in this particular race, and he's looming behind in 4th position. He was doing last to first challenges in this particular week. He likes to do that quite often, actually. So he was doing that in this week, and he's coming through the field with that very fast pace, 43.7. It's like over a second quicker than what I can normally do in race pace laps here. So he's very quick, and I've got to make sure that, you know, while we're fighting with Neo Avante, I don't sort of bring Yama into the fight too much. Because then all of a sudden this two-way fight for first will become a three-way fight for first, and then all of a sudden your chances of coming out on top diminish as there's an extra car trying to sort of take your advantage away. But heading down the straight up towards Blanchimont now, Neo Avante a lot closer, about 8 tenths behind, very close within the slipstream now, and he makes a mistake at Blanchimont and runs it very wide out beyond the yellow and red curb, so he's going to have dirty tyres now, and he could potentially even get a penalty for that, and he's had to brake a lot earlier for the dirty tyres, and because I have the lovely clean tyres from taking the appropriate line through Blanchimont, he just has nothing to fight me with. I'm just able to send it up the inside, and as predicted, he gets a half-second penalty for running it wide at Blanchimont, so he's not going to now have to serve that. And what that will then do is probably put him behind the guy in third. Is that Isataso Mata? It'll put him in third, I predict anyway, when he serves that penalty. Although, interestingly, the penalties aren't that bad in the wet, especially only half a second, because your braking power is very much sort of, it's not as efficient because of the wet surface. So only half a second of braking, you lose way less speed than you normally would in the dry. But we'll see how that goes, because the penalty gate's coming up on this Kemmel straight, about halfway down, so it could be worse being right back at the start, but there he goes. About to serve that penalty. We've opened that gap up to about 1.5 seconds, so we'll see if there's any exchanges in positions. In fact, yes, Yama Kusan has gone up into 3rd place, demoting Isataso down into 4th, Liang Lu down into 5th, so falling off the pace a little bit is Liang. He was quite fast off the start, but he's not able to hold that for the full 7 laps we've got here at Spa. But that gap is now 2.9. We're just going to fast forward it here until we come into Puon on this same lap here, so only a short little gap there as Yama Kusan finally moves into 2nd position. So this is the state of play here. This is where things get quite interesting. I've set a 2:44.6, just closing that gap to Yama Kusan's pace, but Yama has improved his fastest lap down to a 43.5, so again, he's still over a second quicker. Even though I've improved, he has too. So, you know, it's quite ominous in terms of this dynamic we've got in the race, because we're coming up to the end of the 5th lap now. So we're going to have 2 laps to go at the end of this one, with a gap of about 3 seconds to Yama Kusan. So he's over a second quicker than me. If the calculations are all correct and the rough time deltas all stay the same, he could be within 1 second by the end of the race. But what we do know, of course, if I make one little mistake or he gets a really ripper sector, he can gain a couple of tenths, and then all of a sudden he really only has to get into the slipstream range in order to gain the rest of the time, especially on one of the straights. If he's within the slipstream range or the final straight heading through Blanchimont up towards the bus stop chicane, that just really makes me susceptible to quite a large move. In fact, that gap has actually closed down as we finished up this lap, so as we cross the line, that'll give us a much more realistic expectation of what that gap may be at the end of the race. 2.7 seconds, so basically 2 seconds and then your slipstream range, so that's quite interesting. If he's a second quicker than me per lap, that should just about put him within the slipstream range by the end of the race. But that's all going, that's all with the deltas staying the same, because we've got tyre wear and fuel use to worry about. The fuel use is not an issue. You don't need to fuel save at all. I think you've got enough fuel to almost do double the race distance, so absolutely no issues there. In fact, you probably want to burn quite a lot of fuel if you can, just to try and lighten up the car, just make the car a little bit more nimble in changes of direction, but not too nimble so the car starts sliding all over the place. But that comes down to the skill of the driver to contain that. But yeah, it's pretty easy to try and burn your fuel off in the Honda, because all the power band really peaks right at the end of the rev range, so you hang it in the gears for as long as you can, just before you hit the limiter and then change gears. So a lot of practice required there to understand the tone of the car, because you're really shifting off sound, like, because your rev bar's flashing for quite a bit before you want to change your gear, so you're listening for how the engine sounds, and you've got to train your ear to be able to identify the highest pitch the engine goes before it's going to hit the limiter, and that's when you know when to change gears. So it's really, sound is really important actually, especially with the manual gearbox, because you really use the sound, because you're looking at all your references and looking at all your braking points, because that's how you remain consistent in a race scenario. You don't really have extra time to be looking down at the rev bar every single gear change, and it's just one of those things that comes naturally to you. Naturally listen out for the sound of the car, and then all of a sudden you're using your eyes to look at the road while your ears are listening to your car, and that's how you're able to keep your car shifting correctly as well as in a straight line. Really, really interesting how you pick up all these little subconscious skills that just help you indefinitely, help you infinitely. You've just got so much. So all your sensors come together and sort of meld into one to help wheel your car around the circuit. But while we've been talking about that, look at that gap, 2.3 to Yama Kusan, so he hasn't closed that gap just quite as much as I would have expected throughout this lap. He definitely has gained maybe about half a second there so far, because I think it was about 2.7 as we crossed the line, and in fact our fastest race pace lap there, a 44.5, that's right on about a second slower than Yama Kusan. So yeah, our pace is improving as the race goes on. We'll see what it is as we cross the line on this occasion. That gap to 2.1. We go slightly deep into the chicane. That's actually a little bit of a mistake, and I think that's my first mistake of the race. And that's actually a really costly error, that one, going deep at the chicane there, because on the exit there, that gap 1.5, a lap unfortunately a 45.0 there, so quite a bit slower than the other laps there. And I think we lost about half a second from that little mistake, because I think the gap was about 2.1 and it's now down to 1.5, and that gap has closed down even more as we head through La Source hairpin, although it's opened up on the exit down to about, or up to about 1.5 seconds. It's really important that he's not in the slipstream here, because that will just pretty much give him a free half-second time gain down the straight. But thankfully we haven't made too many mistakes in this race. That slight outbraking of myself at the bus stop chicane at the end of the last lap there, I think, is the first mistake of the race. However, that gap is closing. Yama Kusan's got a much better Eau Rouge Radeon, and I think he's actually driving the Lamborghini Huracan, which is another really twitchy MR machine, much like this Honda NSX, but I think that Lamborghini is actually more difficult to drive, and with the wet conditions there, he's actually doing very, very well, showing a lot of driver skill there to try and keep the Lamborghini under control in these wet weather conditions. But we've just got to be really careful now. I was definitely looking at the time gap. So this is actually an interesting dynamic. Remember, I was putting the pressure on Neo Avante at the start of the race. Complete role reversal here. Now I've got Yama Kusan in hot pursuit of me with about half a lap to go, or maybe 2/3 of a lap to go until the end of the race. And he's so close to being within slipstream. And what might worry me here is if he gets into my slipstream range as we head out onto the back straight up towards Blanchimont, because again, that'll just give him a free time gain, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about that. And then if I sort of mess up the chicane, he'll be able to get past, and that'll be position done. So I've got half a lap to just try and remain in this leading position here, and this will be quite a good win if I'm able to get this, because I think I've showed some pretty good pace in this particular race. The fastest lap I've set to 44.5, I think, was my fastest race pace lap of the week. But that gap to Yama Kusan, I've gained a little bit through the Fagnes chicane there. It's opened up to about a second, 1.1 seconds as we turn in to turn 15, heading up towards Courbe Port Frere, towards Blanchimont again, and we still have not fallen victim to Yama Kusan getting into the slipstream. So I think this is going to be a victory as long as we get it through the chicane. It's still really easy to spin out, and we've got the most amount of tyre wear we're ever going to have in this race, so right at the end on the last corner, so it's really easy to spin out. We must make sure we brake on time. Heading into the first turn of the bus stop chicane, we've run it slightly deep. We've got to make sure we get it rotated as Yama Kusan enters the radar. We can't get too trigger happy here and over rotate the car, just get the power laid down on the exit. But thankfully it was just enough to remain in the lead, setting a 19:21 total time. Not a bad total time by any stretch of the imagination there at all. And Yama Kusan just close enough to pick up second position. And if that race was one extra lap, I definitely think that could have been a much different A much different outcome there, but Neo Avante eventually finishing in 4th and Liang Lu in 5th. But I think that was a really good race, so I thought, yeah, why not make a video? Actually, there's Tommy down in 10th. I'm pretty sure that was a guy from the early days of my channel, an early supporter of Smokescreen. But yeah, sensational victory there. Really good battle with Yama Yama and Neo Avante, and I think that was definitely well worthy of a video. So do hit the like button if you enjoyed, and do subscribe if you'd like to see more videos and streams from me. Do leave a comment as well. Questions, comments, and constructive criticism, as always, very much appreciated. But that's going to be the end of this one today, and that means that is it from me. So once again, I do thank you very much for watching. See you later.